Evening, everyone. I'm running a little behind tonight because I found a lot of interesting data about tonight's topic. I want to start tonight's video with a quote from Confucius, and I know that a lot of people are going to make jokes about actual quotes from him. Lots of Confucius say whatever. This is actually a really good quote that I would love to have installed on my dining room wall. I was actually thinking about stenciling it a while ago because it really encapsulates the whole thing. And since we're trying to make today a Good News Tuesday, I think we'll start with this and then hopefully we can circle back around to it and figure out if we can actually make a positive change in the world for these young kids. So the quote goes as follows. It says, "To put the world in order, we must first put the nation in order. To put the nation in order, we must first put the family in order. To put the family in order, we must first cultivate our personal lives. We must first set our hearts aright." I thought this was such a wonderful quote because it encapsulates everything that I've been trying to say with this channel and pretty much my entire time that I've had a platform. It's so important to us to, it's really important for us to understand what the underlying issues are. And one of the things that would sometimes frustrate me at Timcast was that we were looking at all the symptoms of these problems that we never addressed the serious underlying issues. And we would talk about family, we would talk about dating and marriage and stuff, but very much in passing. So I'm glad for an opportunity to sit down and actually look at some of these underlying issues. And today, what we're going to be talking about is Gen Z. So it came across my timeline that they have once again splashed yet another famous painting with more stuff. So I don't know if you guys remember when they were throwing mashed potatoes and tomato sauce at these famous paintings to demonstrate something that I never fully connected. But in this most recent event from today, this is a Klimt painting that gets splashed with oil in the latest climate protest. The artist's death and life painting got splashed with an oily black liquid at the Leopold Museum in Vienna. This morning, November 15th, the climate emergency activism group Leftists Generation's Austrian branch, Letzti, I don't know how to pronounce it, I don't speak German or Austrian or Austro-German or whatever they speak over there, took to the Leopold Museum in Vienna for another demonstration in the recent wave of substance-based attacks on revered masterpieces. One activist splattered the protective glass covering Gustav Klimt's Death and Life from 1915 with a viscous, oily black liquid. The same group made the news last month after smearing mashed potatoes on Claude Monet's grain stacks in the Barberini Museum in Germany. Despite strict security precautions at the Leopold Museum, activists of Letzi generation were able to sneak in the black liquid through a hot water bottle hidden underneath their clothing. One activist was quickly apprehended by a museum guard after splashing the black substance over the painting, while another activist took the opportunity to glue themselves to the protective glass. Oh my gosh, these people. The museum reported to the Austria Press Agency, APA, that while the paintings were unharmed, damages to the frame, wall, and floor were evident and significant. That is not good. I know that a lot of people have been laughing at this kind of protest, saying it's silly. People have been angry about this, saying it's pointless, saying these people are just destructive. And one of the things that we mentioned on Timcast was that evil does nothing but destroy. And I'm inclined to agree. I think this is a good analysis of what we're seeing here. These people are not creating anything. They're not causing good things to come into the world. All they're doing is destroying because they have a point to make, and this is the only way they know of being heard. As far as I can tell, this is actually a serious problem because I see it doing nothing but ramping up. So I suspect what's going to happen is, I don't know if you guys recall, and I don't know much about, but I remember the term, I remember the name Earth Liberation Front from I think the 80s. And this was actual terrorism based on serious climate concerns even then. So even a while ago, people were talking about this, and it's only gotten worse. And I think that it's a serious issue because I suspect that we're going to see bombings in the future. This is something that's genuinely disturbing to me. And I hope this isn't the case, but I think there's such an underlying issue here and so much fear and anxiety in Gen Z and even in some millennials that this is going to become an ongoing issue as we move forward, unfortunately. So let's talk about some of the stuff behind this. And well, let's talk first about the fallout. So first we've got splash paintings, which is kind of terrible, right? No big deal though. Nobody really got hurt. It wasn't a big deal. Now, climate protesters are being accused of blood on their hands after two die in crash amid traffic from a bridge protest. Traffic was reportedly backed up for 6 miles and caused a 2-hour delay. I fully believe this is a fair accusation. I remember, I think it was during the BLM protests a few years back when I think, if I recall correctly, you guys can set the record straight if I'm not right. Let me know if you remember the case of a young child, I think it was a girl, dying in the back of an ambulance because of traffic just like this, where they were unable to get the hospital in time. The eco warriors, okay, so climate protesters in England are being accused of having blood on their hands after the protests scaling a bridge caused a traffic jam that reportedly kept first responders from quickly tending to 2 crash victims who died. Wow. The eco warriors may have thought it was an innocent protest, but they've got blood on their hands. Mark Heap, 55, told the Daily Mail after suffering a broken back and a broken leg on Monday when he stopped to help a stranded motorist and was struck by a speeding car that was attempting to avoid a traffic jam caused by climate protesters who had scaled England's Queen England II Bridge. Lisa Weber, a mother of 4 in her 50s, was also struck by the BMW while attempting to help the stranded motorist on London's busy M20 highway and was thrown into oncoming traffic and later died. Oh my gosh, yeah, he's 100% right. He has every right to say this too, as the person who was injured by this. The Daily Mail reported that a second woman in her 40s was also struck and killed by the BMW. Drivers were using the M20 motorway to avoid traffic backup after several Just Stop Oil protesters, these are the same people who were throwing oil at these paintings, scaled the bridge, causing a traffic jam, contributing to emergency vehicles taking 40 minutes to tend to crash victims. They may not have directly caused the M20 accident, former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector McNeville told The Sun, but had their irresponsible demo not taken place, the woman and van driver would probably not have been there. He's entirely correct. I think they're fully responsible for this. This is insane to me. Like, the fact that this was allowed to reach, wow, look at this crash, jeez. The fact that this was allowed to reach this pitch and scale is crazy to me. I'm seeing in the chat, Andy, I believe, people died in ambulances. Yeah, I wish I had a source for that right now. I just ran out of time. Sorry, guys. The fact that these protesters were allowed to do this is just mind-boggling to me. This is very much like, well, I blame the police less than the operators of this museum because it is fully possible to ask every single person who comes into a museum to go through, for example, a relatively straightforward metal detector, and this can keep them from bringing stuff like hot water bottles in with them, which is exactly how they did that this last time. I think upping the security at these museums would be a good start, but I don't think that's going to solve the problem because this is kind of a deep problem. And let's look at some of the anxiety that millennials and Gen Zers are having about the climate. I mentioned the other day on Twitter that it's causing people to not want to have kids, and I know for a fact this is true. Let's see what the National Geographic has to say about it. Climate anxiety is widespread among youth. Can they overcome it? I don't think that National Geographic has any interest in taking any of that anxiety away. I think that this is exactly what they want. My grandparents used to get National Geographic, and my parents noticed that it started to get less and less focused on the actual environment, like the actual world around them, and more focused on this politically correct stuff. Even like, I think this was in the 90s or early 2000s, they were pointing this out to me. And I thought they were crazy. I thought National Geographic was wonderful, but now looking back on it, they were totally right. I can't pronounce this last name. Katie and Aaron are millennials, but they regard themselves as climate change babies. They came of age as the world was first awakening to the catastrophic impact that people were having on the environment. Okay, so this sounds like a climate crisis, which is fantastic because this is exactly what CNN was talking about to Project Veritas after COVID was done. CNN plans climate change town hall after staffer reveals plan to sell climate fear in leaked recording. A technical director told Project Veritas climate change will be the next COVID thing for CNN. Fascinating knowledge. And I don't think, so we know that CNN is kind of changing their tune a little bit as far as attempting to be moderate, but I think that this is just indicative of what all of these news networks are doing. This is what they're hoping to do. I think this is where the term climate crisis first came onto my radar, was when Project Veritas was talking about what was going to be next after the COVID thing. So let's read the quote. Our focus was to get Trump out of office. Without saying it, that's what it was, right? So our next thing is going to be for climate change awareness. Do you think it's going to be just like a lot of like fear for the climate? The undercover journalist asked. Yeah, fear sells, Chester responded. Who decides that? The journalist asked. The head of the network, Chester answered. Who is that? Is that Zucker? She followed, returning to CNN President Jeff Zucker. Zucker, yeah. Interesting. So we know that Zucker's gone from CNN. I do not believe that CNN has any plans to change their current climate course in any way. If they can get away with it, I think they're going to keep pushing it. And I think all the networks are going to keep pushing it. Because if you Google climate emergency CNN, as I did in an attempt to figure out what Veritas had talked to them about, all you see are a bunch of headlines from CNN about how there's this ridiculous climate crisis and an emergency. Let's look a little bit at the numbers, though, from the National Geographic article. Before marrying in 2017, the couple wrestled for nearly a decade with the ethical quandary of whether to bring another human into an already crowded planet. Katie argued for raising a climate ally, someone who would fight for a healthy planet, but Aaron feared for the future their child would face. We are exiting the stable climate conditions that have spanned and supported the entire development of human civilization. This is a completely unique catastrophe in the lifetime of our species, unlike any that we've had to grapple with in the past. So he sounds like he's being hyperbolic, and it sounds like he's being a little bit crazy. But I don't think it matters how he sounds. If that's what these people think, we need to take them seriously. We need to ask why they think that. And I want more of us to understand Scott Adams' concept of the slow-moving disaster. I don't know if you guys listen to Scott Adams. I find him wonderful. I really enjoy him. Andy and I listen to him almost every day because he does live stream every day, and it's kind of like his full-time job. He talks about how humans address issues that are approaching at a slow clip. And the reason that COVID was so super disastrous for people was because it was sudden and we didn't really have like a plan of action fully in place. We hadn't really considered that this might really be a big threat for us. What Scott Adams talks about is when we have a disaster that we can see coming from a long way away, we find ways around it. Like, we find ways to deal with it. I don't know if you guys know this, but when horses and carriages were big in the US early on, I want to say in like the 1800s, there was talk about how there would be just a tidal wave of horse manure on the streets and we would have no way to get rid of it. And of course, we crossed that bridge when we came to it. It wasn't a big issue for us. We developed a new strategy for getting around, and it was awesome. And this is what humans consistently do. And I think what climate protesters are refusing to see is that humans are actually not a net negative in the world. They're actually a very positive force. There's like they're a very positive force in the world because we're able to adapt so uniquely to our surroundings in a way that no other creature has been able to. And this is part of the reason that I am, and my entire, conservative Christian family truly believe that humans are fully different from other animals. We are able to come to terms with all of our surroundings and make peace with them. So I'm going to shout out to a couple of my favorite authors and a couple of my heroes. I am a huge fan of Viktor Frankl, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and Corrie ten Boom. All three of these people survived concentration camps. All three of them came to terms with their situations, and they hung on to their faith, or they observed that the people who did were much stronger for it. Humans, to our disadvantage, are infinitely adaptable. It's both a good thing and a bad thing, because you can get used to anything, whether it's good or bad. And sometimes that means that we're willing to just be like, all right, I'm not going to do anything to change it. I can bear it the way it is. Not a big deal. But I don't think that these kids are being raised to understand that. And I'm going to bring us back to our Confucius quote from earlier, talking about putting the family in order. I think that if you had a strong father figure like I had when I was growing up, very grateful, much appreciated dad, you will have the understanding that humans are great, that humans can tackle anything that comes up, that yes, we do need to be responsible. And I'm just going to take a second to spout my own personal view of climate intelligence. I think the most important thing that people who have a faith and a background like that can do is to understand that we have a responsibility to take care of creatures who are not as powerful as we are. For excuse me, for example, I take care of my cat because he's not able to do a lot of things. He's able to do a lot, don't get me wrong, he gets up to all sorts of trouble, but he doesn't have opposable digits. He cannot open the food bag, and he's very small, and I'm concerned if he were to go outside, he would either kill other things or get killed himself. And because of that, I take good care of him as much as possible. And I think that part of what conservatism misses a little bit is the concept that we're responsible to our surrounding environment, not just for the environment's sake, but for our children. And this gets back to reordering the family and putting it back to the way it was supposed to be. Because if we understand that we have children who will depend on having like clean running water, having access to the great outdoors, having a good world around them, and not having, an ocean full of trash and all this stuff, it could really put us on the right page as far as trying to take good care of the world around us. I'm not talking about climate crisis panic. I'm talking about a systematic approach to making sure that the world around us is well taken care of. And if you do, in fact, have a Christian faith, you need to recognize that God created the world for us. And yes, that means that we need to take good care of it. However that ends up looking, I don't think that the government is probably the best way to do that. I think the best way to do that is to create a culture that views the world as something uniquely beautiful and in need of our protection. But anyway, I digress. Let's get back to depression. So let's see here. They are hardly alone in that struggle. Roughly 60% of Americans between 27 and 45 worry about the carbon footprint of bringing a child into the world, according to a 2020 survey published in the journal Climatic Action. The same survey found that more than 96% said they are concerned about the well-being of a child in a climate-changed world. Interesting. Climate anxiety is widespread. Yeah, obviously, you just said that 96% of people are concerned about it. Not your mother's doomsday, turning eco-anxiety into action. Okay, well, we see what happens when people do that. People actually die. See the ending. Meanwhile, Katie and Aaron are getting on with their lives. They've resolved their uncertainty, and their son, Asa, was born in March 2021. I'm glad they decided to have a kid. That's just the bottom line. I think that people are wonderful. I think they do great things. Who knows, maybe their son will discover a cure to cancer or whatever. They live in Providence, Rhode Island. Katie, a lawyer, works as a public defender. Aaron, who served 4 years in the state legislature, graduated from Harvard Law School last month. These are very smart people, and they are in the throes of this ridiculous climate panic. So we need to understand where they're coming from. It's not enough to just say stuff like shut down CNN. It's not enough to say stuff like these people are crazy. There's clearly something going on here that deserves our dignified response, and we need to understand that the people who have these fears are people with actual concerns about the world. They've been lied to. And I think that, as far as I'm concerned, this is the environment, the environmental form of feminism. It's just another way of lying to people to get them to do what you want. That's exactly what this looks like to me. And that's why CNN was planning to focus on the climate as a crisis and turn it into a kind of emergency after COVID went away and after Trump was out of office. But again, I digress once more. I tend to do that a lot. Sorry about that. I want there to be good people in this generation to fight for what is right, says Katie, explaining why they became parents. Good for her. She's entirely correct. We talk about leaving a good world for our kids. No one talks about leaving good kids for our world. I feel like I say that a lot. That's from technically Tom MacDonald, although I've seen it before as well. What finally got me was coming to an understanding that the fight for a livable future can't just be about survival and stability, Aaron says. It's also got to be a fight to keep our world from becoming a poorer, darker, lonelier place. For Katie and me, embracing that meant having this baby and teaching him about all the stuff there is to love in this world and committing our lives to fighting for him and at some point alongside him and alongside every other kid facing this uncertain future. Asa, they say, has given them a new perspective on the future. Kids tend to do that. I used to regularly struggle with activism, depressing climate despair. Aaron says, yeah, but I haven't fallen into a single bout of that since he was born. Once you go all in on that gamble that we have a future worth living, nihilism simply isn't an option. This is such a great ending to this article, and I'm really glad that they ended it with this quote from Aaron. I'm so glad they decided to have a kid. I'm glad that they understand that good kids are what makes the future better. They're entirely correct. So it actually sounds to me like they're getting their world in order. And I wish part of the problem, like we talked about the other day, is that marriage is falling apart. People don't see the point in having children. I'm glad they overcame this concern that they had and decided to have a family. And I wish that more people would do this. Honestly, I really think this is the only solution to this, because I don't think that you can just tell Gen Z and millennials that they need to be terrified, horrified, and scared all the time. And then, oh yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. You don't need to, for example, create acts of terrorism. And you don't need to do things like take other people or yourself out. You can't give people this kind of nihilistic worldview and expect them to not do anything with it. I really don't blame people for feeling this way, because anyone with a sense of logic and rationality is going to look at this and be like, this is terrifying. What do I do about this? And we know that schools kind of teach kids to be activists in any case. But I think that I am so distressed by the state of the modern American education system. I really think this is what's causing a lot of this stuff. But more than that, it is the collapse of the Western nuclear family. I think that's just the bottom line. I completely agree with Confucius. I think if we want to get this country in order, we have to get the family in order. And in order to do that, we have to put our personal lives in order too. So if you guys are on the fence about having kids, if you're concerned about the climate crisis, if you have a lot of anxiety in that regard, definitely look through these links that I provided underneath this video. I found this National Geographic article really kind of hopeful, and I hope that more people will begin to see that. But I just feel like we've got a lot working against us. It's gonna be an uphill battle, but you know what they say, hard times create strong men. And I remember a while back thinking, you know what, I think if nothing else good comes out of this, the whole strong men thing will be a huge boon to us already, for sure. So let me look a little bit at the chat and then I will wrap it, because I got a lot to do this evening. All right, Greg says, how do they think this helps their cause? The museum can't change any laws or policies. Maybe they should take this to their government to see change. Yeah, so I'm not sure. I think the protesters in London who were responsible for that accident were trying to take it directly to the government. They weren't doing it the right way. But the whole museum thing is so splashy and so dramatic to me. I know it infuriates a lot of people, but if we want to understand the underlying issue, we got to look past that and try to figure out what people are trying to say with what they're doing. They're trying to get a reaction. And when you just get mad about it, they're getting exactly what they want. And there's a part of me that really wants to be super empathetic to them, but also part of me gets really mad when you see great works of art that they're just attacking wantonly. To me, that is a form of evil. It's just a form of destruction. And I don't think that anything good comes from that. But hopefully, maybe this kind of protest will make some of them open their eyes. I'm not really holding my breath, but all right. And then the Fleeting Floating Feathers sent me a level up. A little hippo biting on a thingy. I don't know what it is. It's adorable though. It's a sticker. All right, let's see what you guys are saying in the chat. Did you hear about Poland getting hit? I did hear about that. So I have a policy about this kind of thing. I don't respond immediately to stuff like that when it happens. I always wait until I get a little more information. So stay tuned. We'll see what happens. I want a different simulation. Well, this is the one we got. This is one we're going to make the most of. Kind of ironic the UK used to fight against fascists. Yeah, I don't know what they think they're doing on top of this bridge. It seems a little fascist to me. Time to destroy CNN symbol. It is not that simple, and it's not just CNN. And we know now too that CNN has a different president. So they're having, I forget what his I think his last name is Lydia or something horrifying, a little bit suspicious. But yeah, their new boss is kind of forcing them to be more toward the middle, which I totally respect. Good for them, and I hope that more of them will follow that pathway. I think they should get ready to be drafted into their country's armed forces. Yeah, I honestly think that would give them a sense of purpose and meaning. Although, as Andy goes on to point out, conscription is a form of slavery. He does not like the idea of state slavery, neither do I, but we have to find some way to give people the sense of purpose that they're lacking. And I personally think that the only option is cultural change. The only problem with that is that you can't do it from the top down. This is what leftists don't seem to understand. You cannot make positive change from the top down. It must be from the bottom up. It must be from the individual to the family. And that's what Confucius was talking about with this great quote. I should put a copy of the quote in the description too. Humans, says Adrian, 90% of us are dumb. Yep, that is true. The Scoop says, set your house in perfect order, clean up your room. Yeah, 100%. This is exactly what Jordan Peterson is talking about. And he talks about protesters just like this. He's like, they think they can go out there and change the world by having this kind of crazy protest and pointing fingers and stuff. And they don't, they don't even have their own rooms in order. Oh, let's see here. Gotta run. Nice listening while I wrap up the day's work. So y'all, thanks so much for joining us. Gregory, good times. My cat's a monster. He kills everything smaller than himself. Yeah, cats are monsters, which is a very interesting study in psychology. Because they are little monsters, and we know they're little monsters, and I feel like that gives us a lot in common with them, because humans should be little monsters, right? According to Jordan Peterson, I think that's 100% the truth. Oh, let's see what Adrian says. Jesus would flip every table in Congress and Senate and the White House. Yeah, 100%. That'd be fun. Miss you on Timcast. Love hearing your voice. Thank you. I'm very glad you tuned in. Love you, Lids. I love you guys all very much in my audience. 100%. Let's see here. My car has less than a tank of gas. I have very little food in the house. I'm in deep doo-doo if World War III breaks out. So I think part of getting your house in perfect order is to try to be prepared for that kind of stuff. And right now we're in such a weird intermediary situation that we're not as prepared as we used to be. We're going to get prepared as soon as we can. I think a big part of that is making sure that, yes, you have plenty of food and making sure that you have enough, a way to stay warm and all that stuff. Just sheer survival stuff. There are different levels of like end of the world stuff, like sheer survival, just making sure you have food, make sure you have a way to stay warm, make sure you have clothes, gas in the tank would be great, is very, very important at a very basic level. And you got to make sure that you have running water. You got to make sure that you have access to funds. Like, see, there are different layers of the complexity that you need to survive. I would call it Maslow's hierarchy of needs when it comes to the end of the world. Let's see here. We only have a responsibility to not live in our own filth, to pick up after ourselves. There's nothing wrong with a person using their land in a productive way. Yeah, obviously. I didn't say that people shouldn't do that. I simply said that we need to take care of the world around us, and that means not, for example, putting a gigantic patch of plastic into the ocean. But there are also really cool advances that we've seen in technology, which is Scott Adams talking about slow-moving disasters. And we have mushrooms that can eat plastic. Ian used to talk all the time about this guy who made this robot who would go through and recycle the plastic in the ocean. Sony. There's such cool potential in humans that I think that a lot of these protesters and these activists are missing. And they're really missing out on some of the best parts of the world because of that. Because it's some of the coolest aspects of human nature, and the coolest aspects of the world is really worth noticing it. It's going to give you a lot of hope and keep you from nihilism. Although the other thing that'll keep you from nihilism is having a kid and making you focused on making a good future for that kid. Just like the two characters in this article found out. Good for them, honestly. Let's see here. Yes, I am live 6 p.m. every weekday, and if I'm not live, I'll be putting a video up. I might be doing that on Friday this week, because we have a birthday party to attend. Very excited about that. And it overlaps with when I typically record. So yes, join me at 6 p.m. every weeknight, and I will be talking just like this about all kinds of different topics. I love to bloviate about all this stuff because I think it's very important, and talking like this really helps me get my thoughts in order. So if you have someone in your life to whom you can talk about this stuff, be grateful. If you don't, go out and try to find someone. Record yourself, go create your own little YouTube channel, have fun with it. It's a very important part of being human, is being able to talk and to convey your own ideas. I'm going to go put this Confucius quote in the description. You guys can see it there. I don't think I'll put a link to it in the description because it's so old. It's certainly public property right now. I'm not convinced, but I'll check it out. In any case, until tomorrow in my different studio, we're house sitting. You guys will enjoy it very much. Bye, guys.